Okay, welcome to our Erev Shabbat class, Shabbat Parashat Ahare Mot. And the question today is regarding the mystery of the external slaughter. What does that mean? I refer to him as Vad Lo Ta'aseh, a negative commandment that can be found in our parasha, which I'll introduce in a moment. And today what we're going to do is a little bit of a different order than normal. We'll talk about the mizvah in general first, and then begin to read in piecemeal, pasuk or pesukim by pesukim, and then analyze, inquire, and resolve as we go along. So I refer to mizvah lo ta'aseh, called, its nickname would be shahita bahus, which refers to taking an animal that has been mukdash, it's been sanctified for kodesh, for korban, certain types of korbanot, and slaughtering it, instead of slaughtering it inside the azara, which is the courtyard, the confines of the courtyard of the Bet HaMikdash, and or the Mishkan, that stood for centuries prior to the Bet HaMikdash, and slaughtering instead somewhere outside the azara, somewhere outside the courtyard. That is shahita of kodesh, slaughtering kodesh bahus, so to speak, on the outside, external to the azara of the Mishkan or Bet HaMikdash, to the courtyard, and that, as we'll see, comes with it, carries a severe punishment of karet, of he who violates that, whether it be a Yisrael who is allowed to do shahita on any korban, the only part of the service that a non-Kohen can engage in, or of course, whether it's a Kohen who does that. So first of all, let's just make a few notations regarding this Avirah. This Avirah, as I said, is any Korban that was sanctified. There's Korbanot of Kodesh Kodashim, which is an Olah, or Hatat, or an Asham, that has to be slaughtered in a specific spot in the Azara, the courtyard, the northern side. Or it could be the lighter, so to speak, Kadashim, Kalim, Shilamim, Todah, Bechor Ma'aser, that can be slaughtered anywhere in the Azara. No matter what, Korban has to be slaughtered in the Azara, in the courtyard. Next notation is that don't confuse this Avirah with another Mizvah Lo Ta'aseh, which is called Ha'ala'a Bahus, which means offering a Korban outside the Azara, not on the large Mizbeach, Mizbah HaGadol, Mizbah HaNehoshet, the altar inside the courtyard, rather on some type of homemade, makeshift, could even be a beautiful Mizbeach somewhere outside the Azara. It's a separate Avirah, offering a Korban. So in other words, the Avirah of Shahita Bahus is self-contained. Even though all I did is slaughter it outside the Azara, I may have not offered it also outside the Azara. I brought it inside, and I offered it on the regular mizbeach, on the altar, inside the courtyard. I still transgressed on slaughtering it, external slaughtering, and the punishment comes with the punishment of karet. Also vice versa. I might slaughter it inside, in the inner area, and then bring it for some reason to be offered somewhere in the external area. That's a separate Avirah. We're not discussing that Avirah right now. Last note, before we dig into Pesukim, is that in the flip case, what's the flip case? The flip case would be basar that's not basar kodesh, kulin, mundane meat, something that the animal was not sanctified as a sacrifice. What if I were to bring that inside the Azara, the courtyard of the Mishkan or Bet HaMikdash, and slaughter it there? So that would definitely be violating Mizvah Lo Ta'aseh, negative commandment, and that meat would be prohibited to eat or derive benefit from, but it would not carry with it a punishment of karet. So the flip case is not as severe. All right, so we sort of framed some of the critical details of this Avirah. Let's go into the Pesukim and explore a little bit more. And we'll see that there are some mysteries to unravel. So we are in Parashat Ahare, we're in Perek Yud Zayin, chapter 17. We'll take it right from the beginning of that Perek, and we'll read through this mizvah. This discussion lasts 9 9 Pesukim worth. So here we go. V'daber Adonai Moshe lemor, Pasuk Bet, daber la'Aharon ve'banav, ve'kol b'nei Yisrael v'amarta alehem. This is being addressed not just to Aharon the Kohanim, but addressed to kol b'nei Yisrael, because again, eligible for this transgression is anybody, not just the Kohen. V'amarta alehem, zeh davar asher tzivah Adonai lemor. Hashem's commandment is as follows. Pasuk Gimel. Ish mebet Yisrael, asher yishhat shor, or chesed, or ez b'machaneh, or asher yishhat mechus b'machaneh. It's an interesting double terminology. It says anyone who would slaughter either an oxen, which is in the behemah gasa, larger livestock category, which can include a cow as well, or a kebes, a sheep, whether in male or female, or ez, a goat, whether in male or female, in the encampment. Now there, they're speaking, addressing the Jews of the desert. Machaneh, the encampment, we know that there was an encampment of godly, Hashem, which is in the Hazarah, is the encampment of the Levi'im, which surrounded the Mishkan, and then there was the encampment of all the other tribes. So whether this slaughtering takes place in the encampment, or whether it takes place somewhere outside the encampment, and what did you do? You slaughtered a shor, a chesed, or an ez. Now it seems like it's talking about something that was already designated and sanctified for a korban. How do I know that? The next pasuk, pasuk dalet. It was not brought to the entrance of Ohel Moed, which is a synonym for the Mishkan. And the entrance means outside the Mishkan, wherein we have the Mizbach HaGadol, the copper altar, which you're supposed to bring korban. You didn't bring it there. In other words, you didn't bring it there to slaughter. Instead, you slaughtered it somewhere else. La'achriv korban Adonai, l'fnei Mishkan Adonai. Dam yehashev la'ishahu. Dam shafach. Wow. Blood is on the hands of this person. He spilled blood. Sounds like a murderer. And he, again, it carries with a severe punishment, and he's guilty and liable for the punishment of karet, obviously assuming he did this knowingly, knowing that it was an avera, and it carries that punishment. It's called bemezi, as opposed to if he did it bishogeg without knowing that it was asu, then he would have to bring a korban hatat to atone for himself. Okay, so let's stop here and ask a couple of questions. And that very pasuk dalet that we just recited. Number one, why so serious? Why the punishment of karet? And number two, I mean, he did a missed location slaughtering, definitely out of procedure, right? Doesn't seem to be. You wouldn't think it to be that serious to that degree. And second of all, what is this about dam shafach? Okay, I know, literally he spilled blood. He slaughtered an animal, but every time he slaughtered an animal, he spilled blood. Why are we framing him as someone that is almost like murderous? So let's go to the Sefer HaChinuch, and as is always a good idea, and see what his reason is, Shoresh HaMitzvah, for this Averah to begin with, for this Mitzvah Lo Ta'aseh, why did the Torah prohibit it? And he goes to say, well, listen, let's take the positive side first. Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu want us to bring our korbanot and have all its procedures, meaning its slaughtering and all the steps which follow, and until it's offered on the Mizbeach? Why there only? Why there only? And the answer is, look, korbanot by and large they're all to our benefit, and by and large, the sin offerings will offer kaparah, for atonement, an incredible opportunity for us to escape our wrongdoings and our sins. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in giving us that opportunity, wanted it to take place in order for us to have full atonement only by his, so to speak, dwelling place. Because as we visit the Mishkan, or later on the Beit HaMikdash, we have this feeling of humility and loneliness and awe and fear. We subject ourselves, we surrender ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and by doing so, we are, in the right mindset and in the right mode of seeking for improvement and repentance and asking for atonement, and then the Qurban will be effective and grant us that atonement. You need that whole package for it to work. It's to our benefit. And therefore, come to my home, so to speak, if you want atonement from my Mizbeach, and do all the activities there. And this person, what did he do? God allowed us after the Mavul to slaughter animals. And you have really two options when you slaughter an animal. Why are you slaughtering an animal? Well, I might want to eat it / sell it for other people to eat, right? Or I can use it for a higher purpose, here a korban, and seek atonement for myself. This person, by slaughtering it outside, did neither. Why are you killing this animal? You're not killing it for your own consumption, nor for your own spiritual benefit, so to speak. So then why? What did you do? Shafach dam. You spilled blood. Now, albeit that there's no avirah for murdering an animal, right? There's no such thing. Maybe you cause him sad, fine, but there's no such liability that we know of law tresah for an animal, right? But the karet is because you didn't listen to instructions, says the Sefer HaChinuch. But you're called shafach dam because you did something murderous in not following the instructions of God. And if I can just expound upon that for a second and explain, listen, if God gives you such an opportunity for atonement, this is why I want you to slaughter this animal. And you are slaughtering and killing an animal for something that apparently is not God's will. So you're a murderer, not vis-a-vis the animal, vis-a-vis God. You're murdering God's creations for something for which God didn't prescribe. And that's why karet for you, because what you did to God, not what you did to the animal. So that's the Sefer HaChinuch's explanation why the term shofech dam is used and why the punishment is karet. Let's read a little more. Pasuk He. So we already said what the act of guilt is and what the punishment is. Pasuk He. Lema'an asher yabiu b'nei Yisrael zibhahem. The word lema'an means in order. So it sounds like the Torah itself is giving us a reason. So that Bnei Israel could bring their korbanot, asher hem zobehem, which they're sacrificing, al peneh hasadeh, across the field, meaning in random places. And instead, bring them to the house of God and to the Kohen to sacrifice there. A lot of grammatical issues in this pasuk, but it seems to be saying, I'm doing this, God, because I want you, as we just mentioned, to direct everything, all your sacrifices and offerings in the right spot and direct it to him. No more randomness in your rituals. Okay, next pasuk. When you bring it, indeed, says pasuk Vav, to God, to the Mishkan, the Beit HaMikdash, and to the Kohen, he will then slaughter it and sprinkle its blood on the altar, as is the instructions of the Torah. And of course, offer the fat, as also is in the instructions. Besides olah, every other sacrifice, you just take the certain fats off the animal, and you put it on the mizbeach. And that's my instructions. This is why I want you to bring it here. But it sounds like we're dragging out the reasons and explanations after we already sort of closed out the mizvah. We said anyone who does this gets karet. Why? Because I want you to do this in the right way. Say what I want you to do right first. It sounds like a prolonging this discussion. Then pasuk zayin, v'lo yizbehu od tzibhahem lasi'irin ashehem zorim aharem, and they will no longer offer their sacrifices to the se'irin. Who are the se'irin? And we'll get back to that. Se'ir in Hebrew means a goat, right? What does that mean? Which they stray after. This is my law, says God. We'll get back to that. That's very enigmatic. And then, pasuk irchet, as if nothing was said yet. V'alehem tomar, and to them you'll say, Ish Beit Israel, any Jew who wants to bring a korban, pasuk tet, last one, he doesn't bring it to the Mishkan or the Beit HaMikdash, to offer it there. Hello, didn't we just say that? Pesukim, Yud, Het, and Tet seem completely superfluous. Okay, so in order to try to explain this, we're going to invoke the commentary of the Ramban. And in order to do that, I'm going to give you a little background information. And the background information is as follows. Regarding our status in the desert, or 40 years in the desert, where 39 of those years we had the Mishkan, and we brought sacrifices there and had its courtyard, as we said. There is a classic and well-known mahloket, a dispute between Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiba, two famous Tanaim, as to Bnei Israel. If you didn't want to offer, you didn't need to or want to offer a regular official sacrifice, a korban to Hashem, you just wanted to have steak for dinner. Were there any limitations, parameters for slaughtering and eating, or not? And according to Rabbi Akiba, no, that's called basar ta'ava, basar of desire that I want to indulge in. Go ahead and indulge. According to Rabbi Ishmael, however, and even though the Rambam codifies like Rabbi Akiba's opinion, most adopt and also most use Rabbi Ishmael's position as an explanation of what went on in the desert. Rabbi Ishmael says no. Basar ta'ava, regular mundane meat of eating and consuming, every time that a Jew in the desert wanted to slaughter a korban and eat it, it had to be done not as a steak on your barbecue in your backyard, but as a korban. What type of korban? Korban shilamim, of the less severe, so to speak, korbanot, that is eaten by the owner as well, besides the kohen who has some participation in consuming it. Every time you wish to consume meat, you wished when you lived in those 39 years in the desert, you had to slaughter and offer a korban and follow all the rules of a korban. And afterwards, you can take it off. The fats were offered on the mizbeach. You can take the rest of the meat home, and now you can make a barbecue. That always was the case, according to Rabbi Ishmael. Again, a vision, a picture that is really adopted by most commentaries. That would happen to Am Yisrael. So now, the Ramban explains as follows. Now these Pesukim make sense, he says. The first grouping of Pesukim, where it sounded very repetitious, right? The first grouping of Pesukim, Gimal, Dalet, it's so spoken about a short, Kesef Mo'ez. Notice it didn't mention the word Korban, right? That was addressing who? The Jewish people in the desert, and not someone who was bringing a Korban necessarily. Someone who just wanted to eat meat, short Kesef Mo'ez, bull sheep of a goat. And in order to do so, he had instructions, at least according to the Rabbi Ishmael's position, and that is to bring it as a korban shalamim in order for you to eat it for yourself. And if you didn't do that, karetz. And the reason given, so that what you used to offer al penei sadeh, in other words, you used to be able to eat anywhere you wanted and slaughter an animal in an unlimited way. Now I want you to bring in all my meat il petah, all your meat il petah oil mu'ed first. Izrak hakohen et adam, and then you could eat it. That is, if you slaughter it outside the azara, karetz. And then the Pesukim continue talking about, after it mentions don't offer to the se'irim no longer, it says again, any Jew who doesn't bring, and look at Pasuk Het, ola o zabah. Then it mentions the actual korban. You don't bring that to the azara, you slaughter it outside the courtyard, karet. And who's that referring to? That's referring to all the generations post-desert in Israel and on. In the actual, that's when they were allowed to eat meat freely without bringing it as a korban. And that's only referring to when you actually wanted to offer a korban, only bring it to the azara to sacrifice. And if you don't, karet. So there's two different scenarios here, really, literally, and two different generations that the Torah is addressing, according to Ramban. Now that makes a little more sense. Let's talk about this se'irim idea, and then end with a comment from Rabbi Hirsch. So what does the Torah mean here in Pasuk Zayin? And they will no longer offer their korbanot to se'irim. Interesting. I saw a comment that said, well, you know what? This whole topic follows the beginning of the parasha, which talks about the Avodat Yom Kippur, the service Yom Kippur, in which there were two se'irim, two goats, right? One of them sacrificed, and one of them is sent away, right, in the desert, and later run off the cliff. And maybe there were some people that felt that sa'ir was somewhat God. They deicized it. It was godly to some extent, and they thought that was actually what was the vehicle of our atonement. And in order not to think that, right, they shouldn't be, maybe, misled to think that everything directed to the Mishkan. Okay, that's an interesting idea that I saw. The vast majority of commentaries, including the Pashtanim, Ibn Ezra, etc., say the Se'irim was referring to Shedim. What are Shedim? What's a Shed? English word, demon. In Hebrew, they're also known as Mazikin, which means harmful, detrimental, metaphysical beings. There's records in the Gemara, Amoraim, actually seeing and identifying Shedim. And the Amoraim saying they're all around us. They're active, right? And, earlier generations of Jews being very conscious of that. It's part of their actual beings. And they were very drawn to such a non-physical being, very drawn to. Incidentally, Sforno says that he had some physicality to him, but it just wasn't visible physicality. It's a very, very interesting type of position. But otherwise, demons, right? Shedim. And this was an obsession, perhaps for centuries and millennia, maybe, in Am Yisrael. And that people actually perhaps seemingly offered their sacrifices and their heart and soul, so to speak, to these se'irim, which are really shedim, or maybe some say it's the Samael, the Malach HaMavet, the angel of death. But in any case, this is the way most explain. So they shouldn't do that anymore. Direct themselves and all their korbanot only to God. And yet there are some who say that se'irim really refers to wild animals, mountain goats that are wandering around. Al Penei Hasadeh, it says over here. There's a creature in Greek mythology called the satyr, which is a man that's partly goat. He has goat legs and horns and goat ears. You see this in a few movies. They portray these type of, maybe that's what it's talking about. It's something has to do with mythology, right? Whatever it is, the Torah was saying there were certain foreign elements that Am Yisrael were prone to following, so that they don't yisbehu their sacrifices, which they are, wandering, they're straying towards everything to God. But how does that tie in, with the rest of this discussion of shechita outside? And I saw something really profound from Rabbi Hirsch, where he says, look, a guy has this animal that he wants to sacrifice. And he's going to make a choice here. Where do I slaughter it? I could either slaughter it, as they say, al penei hasadeh, as a free-for-all, boundless, limitless, out there to the se'irim. Or I can slaughter it in a very specific, designated, sanctified area and to God. He says, a man that makes such a choice, he said there could be no greater contrast between motivations of those two different actions of two different people who make those two different choices, where one person is trying to get nearer to God and comes to the sanctuary of God and gives to the representative of God in his Torah, being the Kohen, and gives his all in this proximity, to godliness, gives his all for sacrifice, as opposed to someone he's al penei hasadeh. He has no limits, no bounds. And he's offering it to se'irim. Se'irim, he says, it could be whatever it is, whether it's the satyr in mythology, Greek mythology, whether it's a shed, or whether it's a wild mountain goat. But things that are, all three of those represent, uncontrolled, out in the open. That person is denying his godliness. right? Instead of what he could be doing right now, bringing this animal and sanctifying it and bringing it, elevating himself with it and elevating the animal, the sacrifice along the way. Instead, what he's doing is taking something that's material and making it, just an animalistic act. He says he tears up the very last fibers of the roots by which he was attached to the sphere of humans, specifically belonging to God. And that type of person cut it. And that's why the mention here is that they should bring their sacrifices that were apinei sadeh, that were limitless and boundless and without any direction and focus. And that's why the reference here is they should no longer sacrifice to the se'irim. And if they do, it's karet, because such a person who has made it, has the fork in the road, those two paths in life to take as to how to sacrifice, how to offer, how to approach, when and where to dedicate himself. And instead of choosing godliness, and instead of choosing sanctity, chooses boundless, limitless, undisciplined, uncontrolled urges and offerings, well, that person, he's no longer godly. He's manly. And he's lost his manliness. He's an animalistic. He gets karet. I cut off that person. And you see that this idea of external slaughter, of shahita, husla azara, is something that is way more severe than just violating the technicality and the procedures of sacrifice. It's really a person who is lowering his humanity and his Jewishness and his godliness. And conversely speaking, we see the great opportunity that one has in slaughtering in shahita, mitoch azara, in the courtyard, and the way that person can offer what he might have tendency elsewhere and otherwise to offer, not in a disciplined and confined and controlled and limited way. Instead, he says, I will do it. I will have full dedication. I will bring myself near. I will draw in proximity to my God and offer to his messenger and give myself subject and surrender myself only to him. The contrast between the external and the internal slaughter of the animal, and between the offering to Se'irim and the offering to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is the essence of this, what was a few minutes ago maybe a serious mizvah. Hopefully we unraveled it just a bit. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen v'amen. Shabbat shalom.